So how that approach spread through the entire world, here the United States played a big role, because American physicians were visiting Germany and were very impressed with what was happening in Germany, and they went
Yeah,
back.
it's always the Germans, isn't it? First time when I heard that actually the Nazis have won the war, that first time I heard it, I thought that's absurd.
Mm.
But now over time, I realize, yes, somehow they did, because, yeah, what you were just exposed to our listeners and viewers
Yeah.
is that actually it's not been, yeah, the Nazis, yeah, kind of their mindset and their approach
Mm.
towards science and their, yeah, obsession with control and being totally cut off from nature, that is what has spread. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
please tell us.
So the the new modern scientific medicine, which is laboratory medicine, started to spread. That ideology started to spread in the United States, imported from Germany, and then entered a very important actor, because it was not long before it was recognized that in order to implement that approach, you needed a lot of equipment and expensive equipment. And there comes the aspect of funding again. Entered that extremely important actor, the Rockefeller Foundation, which is primarily where the funding came from. The Carnegies had an important role as well, in partnership with the Rockefellers. But what was the source of that keen interest of the Rockefellers in the development of a new approach to medicine? Well, it's obvious, Natalie. They're philanthropists.
Yes, of course.
So history has a strange tendency to repeat itself, obviously. So now you have the big philanthropist, Mr. Bill Gates, following the exact same pattern as the Rockefellers back in the day,
Yeah,
because
and he also, Rockefeller, he became such a nice person after he had some people really didn't like what he was doing. So then he realized, okay, before I create some opposition here, I will, yeah, hand them some money and yeah.
yeah, in fact, John D. Rockefeller was almost universally reviled in the United States. People really didn't like him, nor the way he had amassed his huge fortune, nor the way he was using it. Uh, and then, just as you said, he hired a guy who invented the concept of public relations, and created the first modern public relation campaign. Um, can you hear all the noise
I
that is
can
on?
hear a little bit of noise. Yeah.
I'm going to close the window because there's a lot.
Okay.
And now, of course, they left. Isn't that interesting? So, um, Rockefeller Foundation. One of the goals of establishing that foundation was, how do you call that? Tax evasion, basically. Making sure that his huge fortune would be immune to taxation.
Oh, anti-taxing
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like that.
When they introduced,
Tax avoiding.
yeah, when they introduced income tax in the US.
Oh.
So he put all of his fortune in a foundation, but that foundation was to become the vehicle of how would I call that? I feel like calling it subverting personally, subverting all aspects of society over time. And the first area that was strongly addressed by that foundation was the area of medical science. And they did that in a very clever way, which is that they decided to shape medical education, medical training. So all of a sudden it became asserted that it was necessary in order to protect people from quacks and quackery, that there needed to be a very strict and reliable scientific training in universities, and that you could not call yourself a physician without having gone through that curriculum.
What is actually a good idea, that you get some education in the area where you're working, but they again totally turn it upside down, because they then made it a belief system.
Yeah, and they actually turned mainstream medicine into big time quackery, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so the way they did it, of course, was that these new faculties that were being created, that were designed to propagate modern scientific laboratory-based medicine, needed the laboratories, needed the big bucks, needed the big money. And so the Rockefeller and Carnegie foundations were coming saying, hey guys, we'll give you the money to do that, but if we are to give you money, it's only fair that we have some control over what you're doing with our money. And so you're just going to have some of our people in your, what do you call that? Board of directors. The board of directors of your organization. We need to have some of our people there to check what you're doing with our money, just to make sure you're not, you know, just buying cigars with our big bucks. And so that is how the curriculum of medical schools was actually shaped and molded to make pharmaceutical drugs the only valid approach to the treatment of diseases. And why was it so important to the Rockefeller Foundation? Because the main component of pharmaceutical medicines, or as they are maybe more accurately named, drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, is petrochemical ingredients. What a good way to find a whole new field of investment. Because, well, anyone at some point might need some form of medical treatment. So how about treating people with oil? And that was actually nothing new, because for a pretty long time, oil had been believed to be medicine. And it was even sold by actual quacks as a cure-all. Oil could cure basically anything.
Wow. Yeah, sweet oil.
And so it came that a whole industry was created as a new outlet for oil, as drugs derived from petrochemical substances. And if you think it's different nowadays, that it's much more modern and much more scientific these days, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The medicines the drugs you are buying at the pharmacist and that your doctor is prescribing to you are petrochemical based.
What is really, really interesting, because of speaking about entities and energetics, would you please tell our viewers and listeners about the background behind petrochemical industry?
So our good friend George Cavasulas, a few years ago, since he has such a strong relationship with Mother Earth, he asked her, where are the darkest entities at your surface or within you? Where are they? And she said, well, they are stored within my body in oil fields. So oil, listen to this, oil contains the darkest entities that exist on Earth. Imagine the implications of that. Why is it that oil has been imposed, literally imposed, as the only possible source of fuel for our vehicles? What happens when we burn oil to propel our vehicles? Whereas we could have used many other systems, and we still could use many other systems. And why has, other than filling the pockets of the Rockefellers, why has oil become what people are stuffing in their bodies in an attempt to heal, to overcome disease?
And
what are they actually stuffing in their body?
Yeah, so they are actually, as we know, that we are working on a soul level via contracts. So actually people who are taking in those drugs, they are making a contract with those entities that are within that drug. They are actually making a contract, and that is the reason why medicine actually works. It is like a jinn, you know, a demon. He says, yes, I will free you of your pain, but your soul belongs to me. Yeah, that's, I'm not a good devil. I tried. I tried to be a little bit of a devilish Natalie, but actually that's what is taking place on an energetic level. That we are connecting ourselves with those entities, and actually very often those entities, they actually help us kind of, but they never do because that's not their intention. And so all of us are kind of poisoned with those entities. Because it is poisoning on the chemical level, to have those substances in your body. It is poisoning you on a chemical level or biological level, but it is also then bringing in a disbalance on an energetic level.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, by the way, here we are with another parallel with religion. Just as religious rituals stuff your aura with entities, here we are stuffing our energy with entities as well, with products that are promoted and used by the religion of science.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
it's a biggie. It's a very big one. It's a very big one. And now, last parallel. well, maybe not last, but the main one I'm thinking for the moment, last parallel with religion, actually component of religion that you find well present in the religion of science, is the exclusion of heretics. So something that has been more and more important in the field of science over the 20th century is what is called scientific consensus, which actually means established scientific theories. That's what scientific consensus is. It is the theories that have taken root, that have gained a foothold, and that are embraced by the establishment. It is more and more difficult for scientists to pursue any research that would be challenging to that so-called scientific consensus, because it's just not going to be funded. And if they try to go public with their hypotheses and discoveries that are out of the scientific consensus, they will be blamed for it. You will very often get the reaction, no, that's not credible, it's against the scientific consensus. Meaning it's just one little random guy who's trying to go against thousands upon thousands of scientists who are all embracing and forming the consensus. So how could you give credit to that random guy who somehow seems to have become delusional and come with his own little theory?
Yeah, and actually there have been examples where they actually told he or she went mad. Yeah, that is how far they will go. That if someone is questioning the official narrative or is coming up with another theory, they go so far to really tell, yeah, this person has totally lost their mind. Yeah, they are ill in their head. Yeah, they are mental. What is an interesting wording?
Isn't it? So that is a huge problem for science, because it's totally anti-scientific, it is dogmatic, and it is actually impeding the progress of science big way, because science progresses through innovative ideas. If you cannot challenge the old by bringing new ideas, if you are only allowed to produce new ideas if they are contained in the framework of the old, you're going to make very little progress. And that is exactly what's happening. About 90% of scientific experiments that are being performed these days are totally useless. They are inefficient or have no purpose other than spending funds. There are also, at the very least, according to official assessments that come from authorities, at least 90% of pharmaceutical drugs are useless, at least. Meaning that their only actual use is to fill the pockets of shareholders of pharmaceutical companies. And on top of that, these companies, it seems to be a magical number, about 90% as well of their budget is spent not in research, even though that's extremely costly, not in manufacture, but on...
Let me guess, marketing.
Marketing! Marketing campaigns. So
Unbelievable. Why would you have to market something that is working? Tell me.
that's a question. That's a question. If it is so good, why do you need to do some huge marketing to promote it?
Yeah, a little bit to actually say,
Mhm.
okay, it's on the market, but then when people will try it, or doctors will give it to their patients and see,
Mhm.
oh, actually, it's working. Yeah, it should spread by itself.
Mhm. And I'm just going to give a detailed example of that uh, excommunication
Yeah.
of scientists. It's an article you actually forwarded to me a few hours ago.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to actually read it because the guy who wrote the article is actually has the intention to debunk the heretic. So a Nobel laureate, so a winner of the Nobel Prize of Medicine, said the new coronavirus was made in a lab. He's wrong. So that's in the title. He's wrong. So don't try to come to your own conclusions because we already tell you from the beginning that he's wrong. And the heretic is French professor Luc Montagnier. So the 2008 Nobel laureate for physiology or medicine from France, Luc-Antoine Montagnier, caught the media's attention when he recently endorsed a COVID-19 conspiracy theory. So you already have one of the killing expressions here, right in the first
His
lines of the
Nobel
article.
Prize is no longer valid now that he's a conspiracy theorist.
Of course. Conspiracy theory that the virus is human-made. His proclamation was subsequently magnified by various news outlets, including many in India. Yeah, you know it's not reliable since it comes from India. Montagnier argued during a TV interview with a French TV channel that elements of the HIV-1 retrovirus, which he co-discovered in 1983, can be found in the genome of the new coronavirus. He also said elements of the malaria germ, the parasite Plasmodium falciparum, can also be seen in the virus's genome. Okay, a little segue here. The guy is one of the co-discoverers of the HIV retrovirus. And I really feel like opening a short parenthesis about AIDS here, which is another of our most terrible pandemics that has plagued the world for several decennia now.
Yeah.
When AIDS started to be observed, it was given the name acquired immunodeficient syndrome.
What seems more accurate, actually.
A syndrome is a complex of
Yeah.
various symptoms
Yeah.
that can manifest as different diseases. It was not called a virus, it was called a syndrome. After a few years, they still couldn't understand where it was coming from. And the pressure from the public to find a cure was being stronger and stronger. And so they finally came with the idea that, okay, we don't see any virus, so it must be a retrovirus. Please don't ask me to explain what a retrovirus is because I haven't refreshed my memory about it, but it's, I'm not sure they have even been observed, retroviruses. It might be that they're just a hypothesis that's never been observed under an electron microscope, I'm not entirely sure about it anymore. So take this, what I'm saying here, lightly. But what I'm sure of, on the other hand, is that the fact that AIDS would be caused by that HIV retrovirus, whether it actually exists or not, that causal correlation has never, ever been proven. Never. So, for instance, another Nobel Prize laureate, Kary Mullis, he got the Nobel Prize for developing the PCR test that is nowadays used to find coronavirus. And at the time, it is what was used to diagnose AIDS, to diagnose the presence of the HIV virus. Well, the inventor of the test, Dr. Kary Mullis, first said, okay, that PCR test should never be used to diagnose an infectious disease. Doesn't work for that.
Back then, and he says it now again, but he's totally ignored.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's dead now, so that's convenient. He cannot say it anymore. But then he also said, I have gone through the entire scientific literature. I've not been able to find one single paper that proved that AIDS was caused by the HIV retrovirus. It doesn't exist. It's not there. It doesn't exist. But that explanation was very useful for selling drugs. First, it was the AZT or AZT molecule, which was making people horribly ill. That's what people were primarily dying of. It was the AZT molecule. And then they came with tritherapy. And what's really interesting about tritherapy is that it's incredibly costly. So it means incredible benefits for the pharmaceutical industry, funded by the taxpayers. So it's great. It's a manna. It's an absolute financial manna for big pharma. And in addition to that, the fact that a person is tested seropositive can be caused by 70 different factors. But the moment they were tested seropositive, they were always told, you have AIDS. No, sorry, you are HIV. You are HIV positive.
And everybody knew you cannot survive this. Think about that. Being given a death sentence by an authority figure, what that does to your psychology, and your psychology is going to have an effect on your body. Just speaking about the placebo or nocebo effect, when they tell you you have a deadly ailment, you will, and you believe it, you will make it real.
Yeah.
For all we know, you're going to make it real.
Oh, yes.
At least a huge percentage will do so.
Yes. Yes, people tend to be very polite with medical authorities. So if medical authorities tell them, you're going to die within 3 months, out of politeness, people will die within 3 months. Yeah. Because they don't want to disappoint their doctor.
It is, it is. It's really horrible, but that is how it's working in many, many cases. Not always. And then you have the others who are still alive after 15 years, and then they can't explain that. Why is this person still alive? Yeah, it's a wonder. No, actually, that is normal.
Yes. And it is very interesting to see how let's say, epidemic, where and how that epidemic has started, because as is well known, it started in the homosexual communities of San Francisco and New York. And as usual, it would have been sensible to check the environmental factors and the lifestyle factors. before going to the default conclusion that it must be some germ that is responsible for it. And there was something that all of these diseased people had in common, which was that they were using a specific drugs, not the pharmaceutical drugs, but you might call it a recreational drugs. Yeah, in a way you could call it a recreational drugs.
What's the
poppers?
name of it? Oh yeah, poppers. Okay, yeah.
Poppers,
yeah.
Which were really a big thing in the gay community, and I believe to a certain extent still is. So what was happening was that all these men were making use of poppers big time. Why was that? Because poppers has a I'm not sure of the expression in English, so I'm going to say that it dilates the blood vessels, and the side effect that this dilating produces is that anal penetration is much less painful. And so as these guys were, almost all of them were young people, they were using that to make sex for entire nights. So they were using poppers a lot because after a while the effect stops. So they were using it for entire nights,
yeah.
Which basically destroyed their immune system.
Yeah.
And in case you wonder, I'm not homophobic. I'm actually bisexual myself. So this has really nothing to do with prejudice, but with observation of some really extreme lifestyles. And that has never been seriously investigated, even though it was pretty obvious and under the nose and visible. Preference had to be given to germs, because as usual, it enables you to have a lot of control over people.
And from my point of view, there's another layer to this. There is the physical layer that you have explained, and what I found back then in those days, people who have been gay or bisexual, they always had huge conflict with family and they felt often very guilty. So they have been energetically, as I said, you always have to look at the psychology and also the energetic level.
Yes.
So they have been out of balance, feeling guilty. I was just thinking about Freddie Mercury, for example. He was a really famous person who died of that ailment, and I know he had a huge conflict with himself about being bisexual actually, or a little bit bisexual, a little bit of I think he himself has never been quite sure, because the woman he loved so much, he couldn't stay in a relationship with, because his sexuality said, okay, I want to have sex with men, so I can't be the husband of that woman and the father of her children. It's not going to work. And he came from a traditional family, and it was seen as as a huge shame for the family. And so I believe many people, because I knew a lot of people who have been homosexual or bisexual, they all have felt bad about themselves somehow. So there has also been an energetic out of balance, not feeling connected, not feeling truly loved on that level. And then you have on top of it that physical poisoning, and so it's no wonder what happened.
And so if you wonder why you cannot have sexual interaction with someone anymore without putting a piece of rubber on your genitals. You have to thank that bogus story for it. And to me, that's also one part of the campaign to dehumanize society to a certain extent. But people don't remember nowadays how it was in the 80s and the early 90s, what we were being told about AIDS. You know, Oprah Winfrey, the she-pope of American TV talk shows, had come up with statement that AIDS was going to kill 1/5 of the human population over 10 years. Imagine the terror. Imagine the
I
terror.
remember the headlines, you know, of the newspapers, and really, yeah, being someone who lived in that era, um, it's been horrible, and people were afraid because they were thinking about all the fun and joy they had being young, and oh, who knows what I might carry.
Mm,
Yeah, and it's been all of this fear that has been pushed onto the people, and that reminds me of what is going on now. Really,
yeah,
there
oh
is
yeah,
repetition taking place.
yeah. It's just much more concentrated now. It's a
Yeah,
just more concentrated version,
yeah.
and with much more imposition. So let's go back to Professor Montagnier and that wonderful impartial article. So his full quote: "We were not the first, since a group of Indian researchers tried to publish a study which showed that the complete genome of this coronavirus has sequences of another virus, which is HIV." In a separate podcast episode with a different outlet, Montagnier further said the virus had escaped in an industrial accident from the Wuhan city laboratory when Chinese scientists were attempting to develop a vaccine against HIV. The new coronavirus is an RNA virus, like HIV. Scientists already know that many viruses incorporate pieces of other genomes into their own in the natural course of evolution, both of plants and animals. Indeed, fully 43% of the human genome is composed of mobile genetic element sequences, which are the leftovers of viral infections that our ancestors experienced over the last 300,000 years. And it's really fascinating what this debunker is saying here, because he's saying that viruses are actually a completely normal component of human physiology, and that they were part and parcel of the evolution of human genetics, always were. So it makes it a little bit difficult, in my opinion, to view them as these evil pathogens, as the dogma would like us to believe they are. But let's go back to the rest of that article. The new virus also has an exceptionally large genome of
Oh,
about
how come?
30,000 nucleobases. Yeah, that sounds really believable. Mobile genetic elements have been discovered in many viruses with large genomes, including coronaviruses. The Indian study Montagnier referred to had been authored by a team from ITT Delhi, among others. They had uploaded their manuscript to the bioRxiv preprint repository, only to quickly take it down after commentators pointed out numerous errors in their analysis. An article published more recently in the journal Nature Medicine, analyzing the new virus's genome, concluded thus: Our analysis clearly showed that SARS-CoV-2 is not a laboratory construct or a purposefully manipulated virus. What Montagnier called the elements of HIV were short cis-acting elements, please don't ask me what that means, that scientists had discovered in the genome of coronaviruses in 2005. They are required for genome replication and are shared by many coronaviruses. So, if what Montagnier said is true, the whole family of coronaviruses, which originated over 10,000 years ago, how do they know that, by the way? Don't ask me either, because I don't think there were labs 10,000 years ago. Would have to be lab made, and this is obviously nonsensical. Here you can really hear the priestly tone, you know, this is a sin and this is heresy. This is obviously nonsensical. Many experts have already pointed out this obvious flaw in Montagnier's argument. As Étienne Simon-Laurière, a professor at the Institut Pasteur in Paris, said, if we take a word from a book and it looks like another word, can we say that one has copied from the other? This is absurd. Now, the rest of the article is really where you find the Inquisition type, priest type sort of attitude. It is surprising to have a scientist of Montagnier's stature utter such questionable statements, although Montagnier himself is a controversial figure. Among other causes, he had supported anti-vaxxers, homeopathy, and a silly claim that DNA emits electromagnetic waves.
They are really character assassinating him. This guy seems to be someone who's a real scientist, you know, and who really shares his knowledge, and they just put him into a box and thereby say his reputation is destroyed.
Yeah, that's basically what's going on. It's reputation destroyed. No, and here it comes. As he lost credibility among his peers, scientific agencies around Europe began to reject his grant applications. And eventually he was left with no money to pursue his ideas. In a 2010 interview, Montagnier said he was leaving Europe to quote unquote, escape the intellectual terror. Escape the intellectual terror. He added, I'm no longer allowed to work at a public institute in France. I have applied for funding from other sources, but I have been turned down. And the end is absolutely golden. Pandemics have historically been breeding grounds for fake news and conspiracy theories. For example, in the 14th century, the bubonic plague epidemic in Europe fueled the misbelief among Christians that the Jews were deliberately poisoning wells and rivers with infectious miasma, leading to the mass persecution of Jews. So that's something that I find interesting here too, because it is a very prevalent narrative these days that conspiracy theories, there is very often a kind of really unsavory flavor of anti-Semitism about them. I don't know whether you've noticed that, because it's an interesting criminalizing tactic, you know, because you somehow instill the idea that conspiracy theory equals anti-Semitism, equals fascism, equals Nazism, equals genocide.
Yes, I have experienced this in my personal life actually. And David Icke, for example, he has been said to be an anti-Semite, but Semite. What is laughable because he said we are all each other's brothers and sisters, and we should love each other, and he's all about working together, and but and me myself, if at all, I would have been a little bit more to the left politically in the past, and I've been told, I'm personally responsible for the Fourth Reich in Germany because I don't like that they're Muslim. It is laughable, but that is the mindset, and it really reminds me of the Dark Ages, this religious
Yeah.
witch hunt,
Yeah.
and that is now taking place with
Yeah.
people who dare to question the official story.
Yeah, yeah. There is a lot of the Dark Ages that is present
Yeah.
in all this. You cannot question dogma.
Yeah.
So even when Montagnier had discovered the HIV virus in the early 80s, a prominent conspiracy theory in the US was that HIV is a human-made virus that the government had created to wipe out Black people. I rather believe that they were trying to wipe out Black people with AZT, but that's only me. And because pandemics are so fraught with misinformation, they also make for an important time to communicate good science, double check suspicious comments, refuse to accept claims without good reason, and not amplify pseudoscience without suitable qualification. So
they
the guy,
everything upside down.
Yeah, absolutely. So the guy who wrote this is called Felix Bast, and he is a science writer and an associate professor at the Central University of Punjab. Interestingly, they don't say in what discipline he's a professor of. And, you know, because usually you're a ologist of something, but apparently we don't know what kind of ologist he is. He's just an associate professor and a science writer.
They are so hypocrites, because in one case they will tell you that you cannot talk about that because you're not a specialist in this area. But on the other hand, this person, he might be a professor for, I don't know, Sanskrit, for example. And but he can write about anything that is scientific. And that is this mindset for everybody who has a really has a mind that is really open and that is really trying to look at things from different angles. This is horrible.
Yeah. So here you see a fine example of a former member of the priestly caste who was excommunicated by his peers, but behind his peers by the power that be, for going towards forbidden areas, for going towards challenging the dogma, the orthodoxy. And it's the two basic components of modern scientific excommunication: vilification and no money anymore, no funds, no funding. And there is also an interesting aspect to this, which is that he basically expatriated himself. He left Europe altogether. And this reveals once again that the West, even though it is supposed to be freer than the rest of the world, is the part of the world that is most assimilated into this system of control.
Yeah, because it is in everybody's mindset.
Mm.
Here, there is this huge impact, of course, of the scientific community, but there is, all people have somehow, they have made it their own mindset too.
Mm.
Here, they wouldn't question this. If you lose your income and your reputation in a Western country, you're done. You're totally done. In a third, how do you call it? Third,
A developing country.
in a developing country, um, yeah, I think you could still somehow live. Here, you're done. You're totally done. There's nothing you can do. And here, if you're an outsider in society in a Western country, the pressure here is really huge, because being a nobody in a world where everybody is driving Mercedes, and it's really, it's also with money. I wrote it in a book. I said, to walk next to someone who's riding a donkey might feel bad, but here, if you are somebody who has no money in a Western country where everybody is driving Mercedes, you already feel bad for just having just a bicycle or taking the public transportation. The pressure here for success and to be someone is really huge. I feel, yeah. They will not leave you alone, because here is no niche where you can exist and just be yourself. It's not possible. Maybe in India you can go into a little village and have your peace of mind here, and being a foreigner, they will leave you with your own family and leave you alone. But here you will be mocked wherever you go. Yeah. Yeah.
So I believe it is now pretty evident that mainstream science has completely betrayed the promise of science and completely betrayed the scientific approach, and that it is completely under control of vested interests and social engineers and social controllers. And that is, it only has the name of science, but is essentially a religion, a dogmatic religion that doesn't tolerate dissent, doesn't tolerate what is trying to get out of the fence, the prison bars of orthodoxy, of what they called scientific consensus.
You're right. They betrayed the people, really, and they did the same what the religion did. They made a huge promise, but they've just been abusing the population, actually.
So, what would be your conclusion for today, Natalie?
I have another layer to that. They have something else in common with religion. And there comes my conclusion. Because they have taken away the power, aka responsibility of the people. That is the pattern behind both. They came with the promise to rescue people, and people have invested in that faith and belief of religion or science to be their savior, while they've been taken away the power from the people and the responsibility. Because just like religion, where you need this intermediary person who will then for you talk to God, yeah, and um, who is the authority. Here again, you have this authority figure who will then bring you your relief, your health, yeah, who brings back your well-being.
Yeah.
And people are not aware that actually they have a direct line to the eternal, yeah, to all that exists in all of creation, yeah, and that they are creator beings themselves. They are not aware that their own belief is it that makes it possible to get healthy again, and that they can do something by doing research for themselves, that they don't have to have a doctor in medicine, chemistry, biology, mathematics, ecology, and all of that to simply live life. Because me, myself, I was always interested to learn and learn more. And I felt bad when I was young and I was not able to enter a university because I was a young mother and I had to take care of life. And now I'm glad, because I see the huge indoctrination that is taking place with people who went through that system. And I have studied not in a university, but the universal, all that is, yeah. And we have the inner knowledge within us. And that is something I would like to remind people, that we have the capacity to do our own research, to come back to ourselves, to come into alignment with our surrounding, because health is not created in a laboratory. It is created in life. And I know we've been talking for quite a while, but I have a little story I would like to share that has all the elements in it. Might have been 3 years ago. I was having an ailment and I went to a doctor to get an MRI to see what's wrong with me. And when I came home and I didn't have the pictures and I didn't have the results, my inner voice was telling me, you need shepherd's purse for your condition. An inner voice was telling me, you need shepherd's purse. And this inner voice also told me, stay away from animal products like milk, or if you take anything like that into yourself, make sure it is organic, because it has to do with hormones. And what I had was a women's issue. And okay, when I looked what is shepherd's purse for, it helps you for excessive bleeding. And I went and I was laughing because the whole summer there was something growing on between my flowers on my balcony. And I was wondering what that is for. A strange flower was growing there.
Wow.
Yeah, it was shepherd's purse, because we are connected to everything, and Mother Nature already knew what I need, and it already showed me what I need before I even knew I had an issue.
Fantastic.
And so I waited for the result of the MRI, and yeah, they said you have lots of hormones and you will need an OP to yeah.
Sure.
And I said no, I will wait a while, and I will work with this in my own way, and I will brew my tea, and I will do my self-healing, and I will stay away from animal products and yeah, and dairy products and all of that. And then I went to have a check. the doctor who did the who was doing the, how you call it, observation. She had a picture, and she thought, yeah, that cannot be. Then she asked a colleague, have a look, and then she took the phone to call her boss. Come have a look. And she said, oh, it's much smaller. No, you don't need to have an OP. It's much smaller now. And then I said, yeah, what's about the MRI? Yeah, that must have been wrong. It's so funny. And as I'm a wise woman, I thought, no, don't argue with them. Just be happy. You don't need to go through that process, and just keep on your path. And we have an inner knowing, and we have to be in contact with nature, with our surrounding. We have this inner knowing, and we can work with ourselves, and we can heal ourselves. And there's really the inner process and responsibility for our vision. It's really important.
Speaking of that, Natalie, and I'm going to make this video even a little bit longer than it already is. Could you share with our listeners what we were talking about the other day regarding your own experience with the crown virus?
Oh, yeah. I catch that thing myself in the very beginning. And I was wondering why.
The interesting thing is that you were actually convinced that it wasn't even existing.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, that's just made up, because it was in the very beginning. And so I must have been one of the first persons in my area who caught it. And until this very day, it's not, yeah, there has been someone in another office, but actually I didn't have direct contact. So coming back to the germ theory, yeah, it's a little bit, how did I catch that? I don't know. But somehow I got it. And when I asked myself why, I thought, yeah, to dive into it and to have an inner dialogue with that thing. And I realized what is making sense now, as it is said, it has a sequence of the HIV, because I realized it always tried to go after what I would call my immune system. It always tried to enter there and then go after my respiratory system. And it came in waves again and again and again. And when I observed it, I realized it's not alive really. It felt like a program. It felt like a program with a little bit of biology. But it didn't have a huge consciousness, but it was really, yeah, it was really after destroying. It had something, destroy, 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 and attack. And it came back and again, but it wasn't very intelligent actually. So, and what was really funny is that someone that we know, he is called Chris Geo, and he is having ayahuasca ceremonies, and he catched that thing too. And he took ayahuasca to have also dialogue with that thing. And he came to the same conclusion. He had more details because he went on other rounds. I simply did it with my own intuition. And we came to the same conclusion, that this virus has something to do, it tries to really, he also said it didn't feel natural. It felt like many compartments being put together. What would fit the description you just had in this article, these long sequences. And some of them are, for example, in the HIV virus. What is really making sense with my own observation, and also what Chris Geo was observing. And that is another thing. We don't have a laboratory. We just have ourselves, our own natural abilities. And I wouldn't even say I'm 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 really an exemption. I think we all have that. What makes me special is that I'm aware that we have it. And everybody actually has those abilities. And the moment we are opening ourselves for taking back our responsibility, listening to our own body, talking to an ailment within us, it's our own body, or and observing our surrounding. Suddenly we have a plant that is growing in between our flowers. Maybe there is a message for us. So life doesn't take place in a laboratory. We are not laboratory rats. We are infinite creator beings, and we have the ability to talk with ailments, with our own body, with the plants, with the animals around us. We are able to have, it's not rocket science, it's relationships.
Yeah, yeah. And what I find very fascinating is that that thing, that crown virus, let's call it that way, because let's not discuss what a virus actually is. Let's just assume that it is a virus, and that it's attacking people. So that crown virus seems to have lost all of its potency now, because even though the media are trying to scare everyone with the number of positive cases, being tested positive doesn't mean that you're sick. And even though the number of positive cases has increased dramatically because they are testing exponentially more people than they were before, the number of hospitalizations and the number of deaths has dropped dramatically. So there are almost none now. And even with all the numbers, manipulations, and inflation that they do, there is almost zero death left, zero corona death left. So one might say, well, it's because we're in summer now. Yeah, so let's look at the South Hemisphere, where they are in winter. It's exactly the same. It's the same in the Southern Hemisphere. And thus, complete loss of potency. And as we were discussing the other day, we really believe that it is because people have been working as guinea pigs somehow. And that's not the appropriate expression. Some people have worked as facilitators, I would say. Some people have volunteered to be facilitators for global healing.
That is what I believe Chris Gio did, and myself too.
Yeah. Because especially when, there is the morphogenic field, what Rupert Sheldrake calls the morphogenic field, that any species is part of. Any species has a collective morphogenic field. And every time a certain number of members of the species develop a skill, that skill becomes part of the morphogenic field, and everyone has access to it subconsciously. It's the case even more so when the pioneering individuals are spiritually powerful people. They have more of an impact on the morphogenic field, I believe. And so I think this is the reason why that coronavirus, that crown virus, isn't harming people anymore. It's because some pioneers have developed the skill to render it harmless and have communicated that skill to the morphogenic field. So now everyone has the ability to do that. And that seems to be the factor that some might have overlooked. So now all they have is propaganda.
Yeah.
And are they using it?
And people now have a choice, actually. People have a choice to dive into the morphogenetic field and to find how to work with this. Because for me, it was like a program, you know. And Chris Gio, because he has his background, he also described it. It's information. It's information somehow. And if you are kind of hacking the information somehow, and you find out, okay, that is what it's for, and actually this is what it's trying to do. And actually I think what it is trying to do is bringing fear into the collective.
Oh yes.
And when you refuse to be fearful, if you simply refuse to be fearful and become aware that you are a sovereign being and you are the one you're the boss in your own body. It's not, call it virus, program. It is not such a condition that is the boss in your own being. What would be what they tried to tell us, may it be science or religion, they tell us they are the boss. They are not the boss. You're the boss in your own body. And you can dive into that. You can choose to dive into that and find there is already a solution, already exists. I get in resonance with the solution, not with the problem. Or people can choose to go into fear. They have both offerings now. To go into fear, what is propagated by mass media, or they can say, I don't believe that this is really such a terrible condition, and I believe I can deal with this in case I have to. And it's actually now people's choice, because we are the creators.
And that, I believe, is the final word for today. So your word is final, Natalie. All right, so this has been quite a dive. But okay, I believe, yeah, this is a wasp. That was why I was a little bit jerky about it.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll be back soon for another dive, of course, and we hope you enjoyed this one as much as we did. And we say goodbye for now, and we'll see you around.
Bye.
Bye.